Chapter 9 Havoc. Akuma paced the round room thoughtfully. The mighty grey mottled marble pillars, which held the dark blue-domed roof aloft, seemed little more than sapling trees in comparison to Akuma's great stature. Despite the pads on his clawed feet, the room itself trembled beneath his heavy, purposeful steps, causing the 3D projection to flicker. Akuma stopped and dug his large curved claws into the marble beneath his feet, the screeching noise echoing in the dome above as he tore himself away from his dark thoughts to stare at the projection, which was now focused squarely on Requiem. Presently, it was showing the scene of the group leaving the genetics department via the lift. Urisil had lost his earlier mettle and returned to cowering on the floor, holding on to the bars for dear life. Requiem had returned to his casual, calm self, hands in pockets, enjoying the ride whilst bobbing his head along to the cheesy music with Freya. "So tell me, Akuma," called Erebus, as he appeared from the shadow of a pillar in the round room, "why did you not take the Book of Morpheus and Minerva? I'm sure you knew the answer all along, and I can't think of anyone who secretly wouldn't want to read that book." Akuma continued to stare at Requiem, evil intent evident in his eyes, as he answered Erebus. "Just doing my part," he said deviously. Turning his head to glare at Erebus from the corner of his eye, Akuma gave a fleeting snarl, his razor-sharp teeth shining brilliantly in the projection light, before continuing. "You gave them the blood. They need another bargaining chip for what lies ahead." There was something very sinister in Akuma's tone, which Erebus chose to ignore for now. "Very selfless of you, Akuma. Very human," he said. Akuma grunted in disgust, causing the projection to flicker. It was as though even the equipment feared him. "Is that your idea of a compliment, or a jibe, Erebus?" Turning to focus on Erebus, he bore down on him with teeth bared and added acidly, "Both are ill-conceived." Towering above the small old man, Akuma quenched what little light there was, plunging Erebus into darkness. But no matter how hard he tried to douse the fire of optimism within Erebus, his eyes sparkled all the more brightly in the shadow. Erebus might not have the physical strength of Akuma, but he was no doubt his equal in many other ways, and Akuma knew it. Deciding that intimidation was wasted on Erebus, he began to stride out of the room. Erebus knew exactly how to get under Akuma's fur, and simply turned to look at the projection, ignoring Akuma entirely. Akuma did not need to look back to know that Erebus had his back to him, but by the time he had got halfway across the room, Erebus's impudence had got the better of him and he stopped. "I know how to attain what I want," he said, staring straight ahead and playing Erebus at his own game. "What would I gain from taking from Requiem the means to attain what he wants? After all, the day he gets his just rewards will make the Council very happy. Isn't that why we started this in the first place? Although I admit we did it for different reasons." Placing his right hand on his chest, Akuma adopted a heartfelt tone. "I only want what's best for one of my most valued people. It's such a shame I can't say the same for the rest of the Council. But fear and prejudice is what we from the South Gate have come to expect from the others." These last words were dark and sharp, intended to shame Erebus for what he and the others had orchestrated. Akuma's shadow lingered long after Akuma himself had left. Somehow, the regal blue decor of the opulent room seemed to lose its lustre after a visit from Akuma. The velvet blue banners hanging below the dome looked particularly tired. Although the round room itself was always dim, the projection at its centre shone like a beacon as Erebus continued to watch over his band of adventurers, his last hope. The moment they were all clear of the east gate, Urasil breathed the air of a free man. He was charged with new life and was, for once, the boldest of the group. "I've done quite well today," he said buoyantly. "I've survived water, fire, maniac lifts, defecating flying mice, and even the Demon Lord himself." He finished by proclaiming, "Bring it on, I say. If I can beat the Demon Lord, I can beat them all." A smooth voice with Spanish undertones quietly cautioned him. "I would not be so vocal about your supposed victory if I were you." Urasil's eyes darted around the marble courtyard, looking for who was trying to rain on his parade. The voice whispered again, this time in Urasil's ear. "Akuma is everywhere, you know." Urasil jumped forwards in fright, his arms flailing like an octopus, searching the nooks and crannies of a coral reef for its prey. Holding his pounding heart, he span around to see a tall, slim, well-dressed and tanned man standing confidently before him. The mysterious man's appearance may have startled Urasil, but it had an entirely different effect on Freya. She swooned over the young man, his back-combed blonde hair, a few well-placed locks falling across his sharp face, framing his black sunglasses perfectly, was just too much for Freya to resist. Gyo, on the other hand, looked disdainfully at the man in his dramatic stance with his arms folded, a light breeze causing his long black trench coat to waft whilst he stood tall. This breeze was not present elsewhere in the marble courtyard. Gyo took a dislike to someone who forced such things to occur just to look good. Requiem started to speak, but couldn't quite find the words to say. The man was mysterious indeed, and he wasn't exactly conventional. Underneath his open coat shone bright yellow trousers, with a thick black stripe down the side of each leg. To top it off, Requiem was not overly impressed with how captivated Freya was by his partially unbuttoned white shirt, showing his smooth tanned chest. Urasil went to speak, but Freya beat him to it by a mile. "So, who are you, stranger? I think I'd remember seeing you around before." The others in the party just looked at Freya, wondering how many more men she was going to flirt with before this was over. The mysterious man gave a cool, smooth reply. "Senorita, who I am is not important. What I am about to tell you, however, that is of great importance. Go to Istanbul and do not tarry. At the Grand Bazaar you will find the Weavers' Guild. Say you want to unleash havoc unto the world." Walking over to Requiem, the mysterious man uttered under his breath, "Carpe diem," before disappearing into the courtyard. Staring into the relatively empty courtyard that bore no sight of the man, Urasil finally asked the obvious, "And who was he?" With a lofty swoon, Freya replied, "Mystery man. Gorgeous, beautiful mystery man." "Right. Thanks for that, Freya. Come on, Urasil. Where are we actually going?" asked Gyo firmly. "Wait," said Requiem, lifting his finger to silence everyone. Unlike the others, Requiem saw the world not just in light, but in other radiation too. To him, the mystery man was aglow with energy, pulsing out from his body in calm waves. These waves had enchanted Freya, but riled Gyo. This intrigued Requiem. He had not seen another entity this powerful outside of the ivory tower. I think we should indeed seize the day. In this instance, I think that we should seize the opportunity and go to Istanbul. Still in a dreamlike state, Freya said, "I think I could do anything that man asks." "I'm glad to see that Freya is remaining objective about the whole thing. How about the rest of you?" asked Requiem cheerily. Urasil, looking at Freya in dismay, waved her away. "Well, if it's what you want, Requiem, this is your journey after all." Turning to Gyo, he added, "Don't worry, Gyo. They do a really good line in cake shops in Istanbul. I think we could both do with some profiteroles right now." Bouncing on his heels, Requiem said, "That's the spirit. How come you know so much about Istanbul, Urasil?" "I like to holiday near the Bosphorus. I've always liked the fact that I can sit in Europe and see Asia, the meeting of two ancient worlds." Everyone paused to imagine Urasil sipping martinis on Galatasaray Island in 40-degree heat, wearing Bermuda shorts. Coughing to snap everyone out of this disturbing vision, Urasil added, "If we are to do as Mystery Man said, we'll be getting to Istanbul my way, not by way of that sadistic pitbull you call a teleportation device." Urasil proceeded to walk off to the northwest black alleyway with the others in tow. After a while, he stopped abruptly, causing Freya to walk into Gio, whom she proceeded to slap as though it was his fault. Ever the pragmatist, Gio played the role of messenger and slapped Urasil on Freya's behalf. Unperturbed, Urasil rummaged furiously around in his pockets and pulled out a squeaky yellow rubber duck. With two squeaks of the duck, the filing cabinet-sized black bricks tumbled away to reveal a brilliantly lit balcony. As they walked onto the balcony, Requiem looked down at Urasil and said in a sombre tone, "Please don't tell me you use a rubber ducky to get to your sanctuary." Looking sternly up at Requiem, Urasil replied, "And why not? Bombardier and I have spent many a tranquil moment staring at Jelly-Jewed Strait." By now, concerned for his mental state, Gio sidled up to Urasil, put his arm around him and asked gently, "Are you okay? If this is all getting too much for you, we can go, you know." Defiantly, Urasil flapped Gio away. "Don't be so patronising. Of course I'm fine. I'm talking of the Bosphorus. It's a strait joining two seas. However, due to the vast amount of jellyfish that can be seen in it by simply walking along the banks, I have officially renamed it Jelly-Jewed Strait. It sums it up better. Now, why don't you sit on the balcony for a minute whilst I order a taxi?" Gio, Requiem and Freya needed no further direction and gladly walked onto the large balcony and sat staring at the Asian side of Istanbul across Jelly-Jewed Strait. Urasil's sanctuary was a surprisingly modern take on a Japanese pagoda. It had black windows, red clay roof tiles, and was set into the thick forest hillside overlooking the Bosphorus. It was warm, picturesque and tranquil. Despite its modern setting, everyone could see why Urasil liked to come here. They all felt instantly at ease, the stresses and strains of life being blown gently away by the breeze coming off the water and flitting through the trees. They had almost forgotten why they were there entirely. Gio was snoring in his sun lounger. Freya had pressed varying buttons on her clothes to make a crop top and hot pants so that she could sun herself. Even Requiem was sporting brown metallic sunglasses with yellow Polaroid lenses while sitting on the rim of the balcony, ice-cold glass of water in his hand. After what seemed like an age and a lot of crashing and banging from indoors, Urasil came bustling out, also in holiday mood. He was wearing chunky brown sandals. His skinny, lily-white legs protruded from a large pair of baggy khaki Bermuda shorts. The outfit was topped off with a powder blue shirt sporting a large, brightly coloured flower print. Jauntily placed on the bridge of his nose were a pair of retro sunglasses, reminiscent of the Blues Brothers. Gio snored himself awake in time to see the spectacle, choked on his words, and fell out of the sun lounger. Requiem began to slip off the balcony in shock and had to steady himself. Freya merely peered at Urasil. "Funky," she uttered before returning to the sun. Smiling, Urasil said, "Thank you, my dear. Right, I know by now that we all like a bit of adventure, so this should be a real treat. The taxi's here. Shall we go?" Urasil thrust on a large straw hat and beckoned the others to follow him. Reluctantly, they got up. Gio shook himself awake. Requiem brushed his suit with his hands and adjusted his sunglasses, and Freya made her outfit slightly more conservative before following Urasil out the door. The yellow taxi looked just like a New York cab. Freya was already starting to wonder what they were letting themselves in for when she caught sight of a large gas canister in the boot. Dismissing it as eco-friendly, she got into the back seat between Gio and Requiem. As Gio finished squeezing himself into the back, Requiem glanced around the cab. Any resemblance to a New York taxi had well and truly ended as Requiem admired the racing decor of metal-plated footwells and sporty seat covers. He was so wedged in, thanks to Gio, that it escaped his attention that there were no seatbelts. Eagerly, Urasil sat in the front. Turning to the driver, whose seat was nearly horizontal, he said, "Grand Bazaar, Teshekula." He then backed himself into his seat, planted one arm firmly on the side of his seat, and held onto the door handle with the other. Unlike Urasil, the rest of the group did not know what to expect, and so were sitting casually in the back, taking in the scenery. As the taxi slowly turned to the left and away from Urasil's sanctuary, Freya remarked on how peaceful it all was. Once clear of the bend, that tranquility was well and truly shattered as they found themselves at the top of a near 90-degree decline. The driver floored the accelerator and they bolted down the hill. The road did not so much meander as take on a vicious zigzag as they descended. The three in the back were shunted from one side of the car to the other as it flew around the bends. Bearing down fast on 3 cars in their lane, the driver did not stop, simply swung out to the other lane, despite the bend, and shot past the traffic. Just as they were coming out of the bend, they were confronted by traffic coming the other way. Unable to get back into his lane, which was now clogged with traffic, the driver simply drove down the middle of the road, all the time behaving as though this was perfectly normal. Once past the traffic, the driver continued down the middle of the road until a sharp bend forced him onto the wrong side of it once more. Freya covered her eyes, and Gio tensed his muscles, taking up even more room in the cramped back seat. As the driver swung around the bend, they met another oncoming car. Thankfully, he too was on the wrong side of the road, and so they passed without incident. Due to the sheer incline of the hill, they could see far into the distance. Peering through her fingers, Freya could just make out that they were about to intersect the bustle of the Istanbul main street. The taxi driver slowed, but did not stop, and pulled out into 3 lanes of traffic. It should, in fact, have been 2 lanes, but the drivers had collectively carved themselves an additional lane. The taxi bobbed and weaved in and out of traffic. As they travelled, more and more cars added to the mayhem, as all the drivers appeared to believe that they had priority. Pulling out onto a fast-flowing road without a thought for the other traffic, they survived to make their way onto a road where people apparently obeyed the markings. It was a single lane and relatively slow. Everyone in the back breathed a deep sigh of relief, only to have the wind knocked out of them as the driver did an emergency stop. 2 cars to the left and 1 to the right were now bearing down on the bonnet of their taxi. There was much blaring of horns, but no progress. The taxi driver looked over his shoulder, slammed the car in reverse, and scooted up a one-way street, backwards. Now hurtling through the narrow back streets of Istanbul, the terrain could only be described as mountainous. They shot up the steepest of slopes, flew down the deepest of gorges, and zipped around the sharpest of bends, all in reverse. When facing the right way again, they met traffic driving the wrong way down the street. Pavements were mounted, and people backed into their houses and shops to avert catastrophe. Finally, the taxi jumped out of a side road to land in a small square teeming with people, in front of a vast single-storey building with many domes in lines forming its roof. The taxi driver beeped and nudged his way through the people and came to an unnecessarily abrupt halt in front of a sign which read, "The Grand Bazaar."